Looks like most of you saw when you came in our little refreshment area, so please feel free to enjoy that. I did want to make a quick announcement about another event that we're co-sponsoring later this week. This coming Friday, the 22nd, 4 o'clock in the same room, there will be a talk called Mexican Retornados and Families in Mexico, the Impact of the Migration Experience, which is going to be presented by a professor from the Universidad de Guadalajara, San Juan de los Lagos. She is a visiting scholar in the Department of Human Development and Family Studies. It should be a really interesting talk, so hopefully you can attend that. I will set this maybe over by the area where we have our brochures if anyone wants to take down your information. So thanks for coming.
Well, buenas tardes, good afternoon. I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker today, Dario Euraque. Dario is one of ours. He actually studied under Steve Stern and Florencia Mallon and Tom Skidmore before receiving his Ph.D. in Latin American history.
It's their fault. It's his fault.
All that he's done, he blames on. He's actually done a lot. Since 1990, he has been a professor at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. He's not moved from there. He has taught elsewhere, but not moved his position from there. In 2006, he took a leave of absence from his position at Trinity College and became director of the Honduran Institute of Anthropology and History until in 2009 he was served his papers by none other than the golpistas who took down the government of Manuel Pelayo, as you all know. Dr. Euraque has published articles and reviews in many academic journals in the U.S., Latin America, and the Caribbean. His early work focused on the economic and social history of Honduras, more specifically on San Pedro Sula. This early work is available in the book entitled Banana Republic, Region and State in Honduras, 1870 to 1972. It's a massive tome of socioeconomic history. It's wonderful if you want to understand Honduras. He next focuses research on questions of race, ethnicity, and state formation, national identity also in modern Honduran and Central American history. This work is published in Estado, Poder, Nacionalidad y Raza en la Historia de Honduras, Ensayos, published in 1996, and in Conversaciones Históricas con el Mestizaje en Honduras y su Identidad Nacional, San Pedro Sula, 2004. He's also published a long historiographical essay on the making of history, or rather the writing of history in Honduras, entitled Historiografía de Honduras. This is just a selection among his many books, one of which actually is a reflection on what transpired in Honduras between 2006 and 2009. And he will speak to that today, as well as to the upcoming elections on Sunday, which are going to be a pivotal race in the history of not only Honduras, but Central America. Please help me welcome Dario Euraque.
Gracias. Gracias. Thank you very much. I haven't been here in a long, long time. Certainly not in the buildings and so forth. I've passed through here. It's a great pleasure to be here, even though sometimes we're going to talk about some very sad things, but after all, this is Latin America. So, and yes, Steve was my dissertation director many, many years ago. So it's wonderful to see him, and hopefully see Florencia later. And I had a great time here. It was a terrific place. My daughter applied to come here and was actually admitted, but I more or less persuaded her that it was very cold. And so she'd go to Tulane when she did, and to New Orleans, which is where I learned English many, many years ago when I first came to the United States. Just to jump into this, Francisco was making reference to a book that I published in Late 210, which is a memoir. It's a memoir, I'll show you the cover of the book in a moment, of the coup, and especially with the cultural policy we were implementing as part of not only what was happening at the Ministry of Culture, but in what you're going to see mostly today, in the Institute of Anthropology and History of Honduras, which is the institution charged with protecting, conserving, researching, and divulgando, and to publicize the cultural heritage of the country, meaning all its museums and archaeological parks and so forth. And when we came to office in 2006, actually the government came to office, I was President Zelaya, and the Minister of Culture, who was a historian at the time, requested a leave of absence from my college, and they actually granted it to me for 3.5 years, and then actually for 4 years, but it ended at 3.5 because we were removed in a coup. So I then became charged with designing and implementing a cultural policy that actually originated in my own scholarly work on race and ethnicity and culture and so forth, in the various books that Francisco was referring to. So for me, it was an extraordinary opportunity. Other than being Minister of Culture of Honduras, that was the job of a lifetime. And that one ended up in the coup, but who knows, maybe there may be another opportunity in the future. And we were doing that. And what I want to do today is talk a little bit about what was that cultural policy, its explanation, how we were trying to implement it, and why, and what happened to it after the coup, and where is it now on the verge of other elections, or in elections coming up Sunday. I fly to Honduras from Chicago Sunday to go vote in those elections and to be there for whatever happens between November 24th and the 27th, when I return to the United States. So we're going to start with maybe someone gets the lights to give you some context about the immediate aftermath of the coup by just showing you 4 minutes of a little video to give you some context of the immediate aftermath, and then we're going to go back to the cultural policy as such.
Todos estaban ya interesados de seguir mejorando, seguir buscando más cómo hacer, producir la historia de usted y también mantener la lengua y el costumbre, que prácticamente en el grupo étnico ya no se encuentra fácilmente total de esa naturaleza. Por eso se estaba haciendo un esfuerzo para que en verdad que el jefe de Estado también que nos reconozca como grupos étnicos, ¿verdad? Pero lastimosamente yo lo siento cuando llegó el punto del problema del Estado, ¿verdad? Porque todavía no estábamos en un proceso, no habíamos terminado.
Proceso se descarriló instantáneamente en el momento en que se produjo el golpe.
Fuimos a la marcha, estuvimos un rato ahí, de repente vimos como una estampida de gente, era confuso porque estaban con bombas lacrimógenas. En la confusión me perdí del grupo y nos empezaron a agarrar
a otras personas y a mí y nos subieron a una patrulla. Dijeron que iban a Choloma y se fueron por la parte de atrás. Escuché que le dijeron a un policía, Chepe Luis, ¿y esta para dónde va? Va para San Pedro, le dijo. Entonces solo yo me quedé en la paila de la patrulla. Y no sé qué rumbo tomaron porque el policía me llevaba boca abajo, enchachada, con un pie en mi espalda. Me llevaron a un lugar montarroso y me bajaron y me dijeron, hoy sí, cabrona, ya vas a ver lo que te va a suceder por andar en cosas que no te convienen. Me violaron 4 policías.
Sentir la violación de las mujeres que se manifestaban en la resistencia como un agravio fue, yo creo que un elemento central de la construcción de nuestro enojo, que no va a ser satisfecho por una mediatización. Nadie nos va a engañar. Sabemos que tenemos que sacar este asunto adelante, que tenemos que cambiar esta situación, que no pueden permanecer impunes las violaciones a los derechos humanos y que no podemos colaborar con la gente que pretende ignorar o encubrir o blanquear la situación de los derechos humanos en Honduras. Esta gente ha cometido crímenes de lesa humanidad y tiene que ser responsabilizada de esos crímenes.
I need to change her. Is this? Okay, I just wanted you to see something of that because I'm going to get into a discussion of cultural policy and various things, and sometimes it can get a bit, I think for those of us who lived through that and more in 2009, you know, and those of you who did not, all that can get lost. And I think it's important for you to realize that when we're talking about these matters, especially as we go into another very volatile political situation next Sunday, is that you keep in mind that there were lives at stake and so forth. And I also wanted to say that because too often, at least in my view, many Latin Americans who I talk to, including many very progressive, well-intentioned ones, often said, well, but the coup in Honduras seemed like a light coup. You know, because there's a sense that the real serious coups and the sort of paradigmatic coups are Chile, 73, and a whole range of others that we can talk about. And since this one was even recognized by the government, was recognized by the United States, and what is that? Which we can talk about. But nonetheless, the particularities of what happened in Honduras does not mean that there, in fact, I'll end with this, and I'll show you something I think you'll find a bit interesting, which we were talking about last night, about the way I was forced out. It was a very civilized but very violent way at the same time, and I'll show you a clip about that. So I wanted you to keep that in mind as we move forward. Cultural policy in Honduras, what does that mean? It meant that the Institute of Anthropology and History, since its founding in 1952, had very much been had existed with a commitment to promoting the tourism to a Mayan archaeological site in the western part of Honduras, classical Mayan site called Copan, which is a World Heritage Site declared so by UNESCO in 1980. So most of the funding, both national as well as international funding from Inter-American Development Bank, USAID, World Bank money and so forth, and other kinds of money went into restoring and, this archaeological site, which is, if you notice, it's about 12 kilometers actually, from the border with Guatemala. And so most of Honduras today, as well as ancient Honduras, is not connected to that history. And I had written a number of books, not only documenting that, but detailing the implications of that reality for, that historic reality for Honduran sense of their national identity. Yeah? So the cultural policy overall was to decenter Hondurans' sense of that cultural identity, particularly the ancient cultural identity, was Mayan. So we wanted to promote non-Mayan, not be against Maya, but promote all the other ethnic cultures were very much alive in Honduras, and in fact in much greater numbers, by not only evaluating their living cultures, but also creating new archaeological parks, new museums, promoting music, cuisine, all those sorts of things. Now, that's all very easy to talk about, but that it inevitably means shifting budgets, right? And whenever you shift budgets, and those of you who are in charge of budgets here, for example, that immediately starts to create waves of various sorts. Right? And in the case of Honduras, it was not just shifting budgets away from Copan to other cultural or cultural heritage areas, but it also played with people's sensibility about who they were. And Honduras is a very poor society, often known as the classic banana republic, the first banana republic. There's so many banana republic things. That's why the title of my first book in English is called Reinterpreting the Banana Republic, and I put it in quotes, and it came out of the dissertation that Steve supervised and so forth. And so, because Honduras plays such an ignominious role in Latin American hierarchies of all kinds, as the poorest country next to Haiti and all these other things, the role that the Mayan past plays in Honduran identity has become a kind of way of being in the world, having importance in the world, because who does not know about the Maya? And who does not care about the Maya? To be even somewhat cool, even in Latin American circles, is to know about the Maya. But the Pech, or a whole range of other peoples in Honduras, nobody's going to get excited about that. Yet the Maya do. And in fact, this poster, speaks to that issue because it's very generalized. This is actually a poster that came out. This is from Argentina, which was denouncing the coup. Right after the coup, and it says in Español, dice, visite Honduras, a voyage to the past. I know the coup is a going back, right? Because coups were seen as, that's old Latin America. But notice what's the iconography that centers it? Is the ancient Maya. So even amongst people who are resisting the coup, the reference to Honduras, what defines Honduras is Mayanness. And that, of course, was the main challenge that not only I had been writing about, but that I was now, after 2006, in a position to actually shift budgets and make policy on. And that's what we were doing, broadly speaking. And in that memoir, which is also online, by the way, I wrote it in Spanish, so it's 500 pages worth of detail about what we were doing. So today you're just going to get a little bit. A little bit about the archaeological park called Copan. So those of you, anyone ever been to? Oh, really?
Yeah.
When?
In 2007.
Oh, I was directing that when you were. And you?
I lived in Honduras for my student
Oh.
I was living in Honduras from 06 to 08.
Oh, okay.
I saw the Maya election, not the end.
Okay, but you were there during the coup? Oh, okay. So anyway, just for those of you who haven't, which is most of you, to give you a sense, go through a little bit of the, it's an extraordinary place. For me, it was an enormous privilege because when you're the director of all these things, you get to do and see a whole bunch of things that you, for example, never saw. A hold, for example, the remains of the founder of the lineage of the 4th century and all these kinds of wonderful things, right? So this is an interest to it. And I want you to just take a quick look at these monuments and stela and so forth, because you'll see the role that they play in the modern identity of Honduras in a moment. So I'll go quickly through these. Are just shots so you get a sense of it. I haven't returned since April of 2009, because the coup was in June, and I'm not one of the most welcome people there now, but it was an extraordinary time at that point. Now, I have a number of chapters in various books on this issue, Mayanization architecture in Honduras. That archaeological park, which began to be restored from the 30s all the way through the 1990s, then became the basis of not only Honduran national identity, but as it says there, la raíz de la nacionalidad. This is a cover of a magazine. There are hundreds and thousands of magazines like this and so forth. In other words, the point I'm trying to make is that as the archaeological site was restored with international funding and local funding, it became the emblematic iconography of our ancient past, even though the living people, and not only that, the ancient ancestors of those living people were not Mayan. Nonetheless, the Maya became us, in effect, right? So everything from Maya toothpicks, I have, by the way, a database, and I initially was going to write a book about this, but there's too much pain and tiredness and so forth. So if anyone wants to do a dissertation or something, I have about 1,000 photos of database on this, so you can just see a few here, because one of the things that I did when I was director, I had, of course, lots of people who I employed, so I said, take photographs of everything you see about these things, and this is just Maya toothpicks, but of course the stela are always very prominent. Maya soaps in the hotels, etc. Maya water, Maya pupusas, which is quite interesting. It's a juxtaposition. Tortillas Maya. And here's one of my favorites. This is the front of a T-shirt, which has the paw of a jaguar. And if you know anything about Mayan culture, the jaguar is very, very important, right, animal and so forth. And this is it's a T-shirt that was sold at a bar that was called La Casa del Jaguar. Just keep that in mind. Remember, it's a bar. So I'll tell you, go to the back of the T-shirt. I actually still have one of these. And there's something called Orgasmo Maya. Yeah? So Mayanization, this is what I call Mayanization, is at all levels. It's in architecture, and I have, again, thousands of images of this. It's on Honduran currency. All over the place, but even at that, very basic human sensibility there. Actually, it's a very bad drink, because I had one, a drink. Now we get to the sad parts about this and what happened. So remember that the cultural policy, and I don't have the time to get into it all, was basically to say, no, we're not primarily Maya, and we must change the museums, the archaeological parks, to really reflect whom we are in our ancestral identity. And that was to challenge all kinds of history and policy. Tourism, for example, the Ministry of Tourism was totally against this because, of course, for them, their charge was to generate dollars from tourism. And the main tourists, besides the Caribbean coast and scuba diving off of Roatan, is the Mayan part. And the difference here was that I was supported by my minister, whom you saw in the clip, and as well as President Zelaya. Now, President Zelaya didn't know much about what we were doing. I mean, he had some ideas. We would talk to him about that. He just said, okay, well, sounds good what you're doing. He was involved in a lot of other stuff. But he was fully behind this. So when we challenged these issues, for example, at very high-level meetings, both in Honduras as well as Washington and elsewhere, we would say to for example, the Inter-American Development Bank, who had committed, let's say in the previous administration, $8 million to another restoration of another Mayan temple, we'd say, No, you know what, we're going to propose that we take $6 million of those dollars, and there is a terrific archaeological site called Yarumela, which is Lenca-based, which is just as fabulous and interesting, and in fact, it's right in the middle of the country and would give Honduran, in fact, most Honduras in that area are descendants of Lencas, and we're going to go there. And then, of course, the Inter-American Development people would say, but who are those people? And why, you know, but the Maya is the Maya, right? But we had the support of the president. So at that point it was, right? Now of course, when the coup happened, then all that changed. Or La Esperanza, for example. We're doing a lot of work in La Esperanza of different sorts with the Lenca there. Many projects. I don't know if you've read my memoir, but you'll see, have you? Oh, you actually have, someone's read my memoir. So you know that we were doing lots of things there. So anyway, when the coup happened, all that came to an end. Most of that came to an end. And again, you can read the details of this in the memoir itself. And basically what happened after the coup, there's a documentary, by the way, you can see on this for 33 minutes that I wrote the script for. You can see it on YouTube. And it shows this in detail. It was basically reverted to the previous policy, that is, focus on the Maya. And yes, you do a few things here and there, and, you know, with the Lenca here or the Garifuna there, but nothing with the systematic approach that we had undertaken and shifting the budgets and so forth. Now, what is this picture? I wanted to show this because about this point that I made earlier about the nature of the coup. And I want to tie this a little bit to the elections that are coming because it's a very volatile situation. But it may not end up in a kind of, again, the paradigmatic coup that many Latin Americans have in mind, depending on what happens on Sunday. This is a very